The Anhalter Bahnhof, Berlin's gateway to the Kaiser's once mighty realm, seemed a shadow of itself on this January night in 1919. The crackle of guns was too far off to be heard, but the silence of fear muffled the usual hurly-burly and pervaded the ghostly hallways of the Romanesque railway station. No welcome mat greeted the few arriving passengers, only armed soldiers who guarded their path. Diplomats in derbies and soft dove gloves, movie stars in silks and feathers, bankers with waxed mustaches and starched collars had once disembarked here from Prague, Vienna, Paris, and Rome. Tonight, the tired travelers who emerged from the Kassel train were mostly demobilized German soldiers returning from the war, or businessmen hoping to find orders for their wares and services. But there was one smartly dressed American woman. Her shapely figure wrapped in a fur coat, auburn hair tucked in a fur hat, and manicured hands warmed in a muff. Marguerite Harrison moved through the soaring arches on her way to adventure. Outside the station's entrance, moonlight beamed from a clear, dark sky, revealing empty streets where lines of taxis once stretched. Fatigued, yet exhilarated, she sat down on her leather luggage, crossed her legs at her ankles, and waited. Something would come along. It always did. She had made the trip to Berlin via Paris to Koblenz, and then to Frankfurt in an unheated train filled with shivering workers on their way to factories in the east. Arriving on the enemy soil of Frankfurt in the pitch black of 5 a.m., she had had no pass, no permission, and no credentials. She could easily be imprisoned or expelled. Yet with her perfect command of the German language and a self-assurance that stemmed from patrician roots, she had confidence that somehow she would be allowed to stay. The hotel clerk in Frankfurt told her she was the first American he had seen in 4 years. All he wanted, he said, was Ruhe und Ordnung, peace and order, the national chant of the German people. He brought her an ersatz coffee made of chicory and peas and directed her to the office of the Workmen's and Soldiers' Council, where she asked for permission to travel to Berlin. With the cocksure knowledge he and his fellow Bolsheviks would soon take over the world, the bureaucrat in charge stamped a paper and handed it to her. Frau Marguerite Harrison of Baltimore had an official pass to travel as a journalist unhindered to Berlin. The next morning when she left, she learned she could go only as far as Kassel. Berlin was closed to all but the military. Crammed on a train with twice the usual number of passengers, a ride that took 8 hours instead of the scheduled 2, she arrived in Kassel, marched into military headquarters, and asked for permission to travel the 200 miles to Berlin. She was turned down. Luckily, the major in charge succumbed to her flirtations. The military card he gave her was the gilded key to every city in the country. Storing the official pass safely in her purse, she was on her way to Berlin. Now, at the Anhalter Bahnhof, Marguerite Harrison, newspaper correspondent and secret agent, waited for a cab. Born Marguerite Elton Baker, daughter of a shipping magnate and his noted hostess wife, Elizabeth Livesey, cared for by governesses and schooled by tutors, she was the privileged offspring of one of Baltimore's richest families. Keenly intelligent, always daring and eager for challenge, she relished danger and was willing to accept the consequences so long as they delivered a more interesting life. As a red-haired sprite, she climbed towering spruce trees. As a Radcliffe student, she nearly ran off with her landlady's son. As a debutante, she was courted by princes. As a beautiful heiress, she was betrothed to an impoverished man. Still eye-catchingly pretty at 41, she was no longer the social butterfly, Miss Marguerite Baker, who loved to drink champagne and flirt at parties. Nor was she Mrs. Thomas Harrison, wife of a prominent stockbroker/sportsman/clubman, who was a devoted father to their son. She was, instead, Mrs. Marguerite Harrison, young-looking widow, hard-working correspondent, undercover spy.